Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Chris.
And I'm Dola.
This is the mommy.
Yeah, AKS Mom.
We dragged her into the studio today because we are doing a swatch and tell. So each one of us has some swatches, and we're actually all kind of like using our swatches in different ways. So we want to show you all the different reasons you might want to participate in, swatch game. So I guess we'll start with Lisa.
Okay. So my swatches are all knitted. And, I'm going to start with my next project. So although I have a more than half finished sweater on the needles, and I've got a shawl that's working, I'm already looking ahead to my next project, and I'm very excited about it. So I started swatching for it. I've told myself I cannot start the knitting yet, but
that's what you tell yourself.
I can totes start the swatching. So far I've done 3 swatches. Okay. So the first 2 are the 4-inch swatches they tell you to do in just about every pattern. So I cast on the number of stitches they told me, and I think it was 18 stitches and 26 rows. And the first one I did.
And this is just in stockinette?
Yeah, this is just in stockinette. Matter of fact, doing the swatches convinced me that I want to do this sweater as a stockinette sweater.
Oh, you're not going to do the textures?
I'm not going to do
this is news.
I'm not going to do the texture. I just made news right here. Because I did a swatch. I started a swatch in the texture, and I kind of hated knitting it. I was like, oh, this is gonna be a pain in the butt.
It was a nice texture though.
It wasn't a bad texture, but it was kind of a pain in the butt to knit. So I was like, I'm gonna do it in stockinette. It'll be just fine.
So are you faster in stockinette than you are with other stuff?
Yeah. Not only that, it wasn't even a speed thing. It was that.
Was it just tedious?
It was tedious. Okay. It was tedious to knit, and I didn't like it. I was like, nah, that won't be any fun.
This is another reason to swatch.
Yeah.
Find out if you actually want to do that pattern stitch.
Exactly.
Because sometimes, no, you don't.
On 18 stitches rather than a full sweater's worth of stitches when you're already kind of committed. So the first swatch I did on a US 9, which was the size recommended from the pattern. And it looked okay. And if you count my knots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yep. On size 9. That's how I keep track of what needle I use. That way.
That's the funniest thing to me.
When I forget in 6 months, I'll always have a record of what needle I used. So what happened with this one when I washed it and I blocked it, because it really changes. As you can see, my stitches are taller than they are wide. So no matter what I did, and I knew this because it's a quirk of my knitting, I was always going to get more length than width, but it did shrink in a bit. And I wasn't too happy. I wasn't as happy with the fabric because I felt like it was a bit too flimsy. So I went down a needle size, and that's when I did this swatch. And I went down to a US 8. Now this is bulky weight yarn, and I'm working it on a US 8, and it just gave me a fabric that I like the smooth face of much better. So this swatch I also blocked and laid out to dry. Now, when I block a swatch, I block the swatch the same way I'm going to block the garment. This is a non-superwash wool, and it doesn't require any stretching. So I made sure in particular not to stretch this out. I just laid it out flat as I could, and with these 2, I didn't even pin them. Now, my real swatch, I consider those...
Now, why is this the real swatch?
Okay, these 2 swatches were just to help me figure out what needle size I was going to use.
So what are you going to get from the other swatch?
So this is a swatch I'm going to measure to size the sweater. This swatch, I doubled that size because I knew I get a swatch at least 5 inches wide. Well, that first one was 5 inches. This one is 4 inches. So I doubled it out. Instead of doing the 18 stitches, I did something like 36 stitches.
That's double 18, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I got
math.
all that math. And I got a much bigger swatch. When I initially measured it, when I was fresh off the needles, it measured 7 inches wide. Now that I have blocked it, it measures like 5.5 inches wide. I think that's what it measures.
It shrink.
No, oh, it didn't. It didn't shrink that much.
Okay. I was like, that's a lot.
Yeah, I was worried. I was like, oh, that doesn't sound right.
So,
It
what
measures.
is it actually?
It measures 6 3/4.
Okay.
Okay.
Like,
But you want your swatch at least 6 inches. I could have gone bigger than this because what you're trying to do is create a fabric that acts as though you snatched it out of the middle of the theoretical garment you had. That's how it's described in books a lot. This one I did pin slightly, but I did not stretch it because my edges curled so much on this one, it was going to make it hard to measure. So I wanted the edges to lay flatter. So I did pin it, but without any stretching. And I just like the fabric better. I mean, I think it has a
so
nice...
this will be the vest.
Yes.
Okay.
It has a nice drape to it. It's still, very cozy. But this is what I'm going to measure. And something like this is what I'm going to measure it with. You don't really want to use a tape measure to measure your swatches.
Because it's see-through.
Oh, yeah.
So
It's see-through.
it's a T-square.
Any kind of rigid ruler.
You need a flat ruler, don't you?
You need a rigid ruler. And I'm going to let Mom explain to you why she's laughing now. Go ahead. Tell her, Ma.
I use a 36-inch ruler to measure my
She
crochet.
has a pet yardstick.
And
Yes,
they
she does.
they
It's
keep
basically
laughing at me,
her
but you
pet.
know what? Now
And
everybody's using the ruler
She
to measure.
carries it around the house, and sometimes she's like, "Oh, have you seen the ruler?" Because she just always wants it near her. She has a very unusual relationship
With
with it,
her
so it's
ruler,
really
yes.
like a pet.
Yes. Whatever.
And since we can't do anything seriously,
No,
I noticed. I've seen Lisa using it these days.
I have used it. It's not wrong. It's not bad. But okay, I'm gonna blow up his spot now. Someone who is not to be named will come out of her bedroom at midnight and go, "See my ruler?"
Because I'm working.
And we're looking at her like, "What are you doing with it?"
pet. You don't need this now. But it's her pet. It's her buddy. It's just
Yep.
yeah.
But anyway, back to measuring. You want to use something rigid because tape measures can stretch over time.
See that I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
And
I know,
sometimes
I
they're
saw-
just not well made.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw a picture of 2 different tape measures where the numbers were off, and it messed with my mind. And now I don't trust any tape measure ever. So I think I'm going to
No.
have to get some.
Rulers too. You have to check them.
If they're not well made, the
Yeah.
numbers are off.
The less you
Yeah.
paid for it, the less
Yeah.
likely it is.
So
to
my
be
Dollar
accurate.
Tree ruler is not a good measure.
You have to check it against one that you
Okay.
know
Yeah.
is right.
All right,
Yeah.
back to swatches.
So use something rigid because that's going to give you your most accurate measurement. I kind of like this because the measurement starts from here, and I can use this to kind of line up on the edge and get the most accurate measurement. Now I'm going to say something controversial. I don't measure a 4-inch section or several 4-inch sections or several 2-inch sections on different parts of the swatch. I measure the whole swatch,
thing, and then
edge
divide.
to edge,
Yes.
and then divide by the number of stitches.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got that one from Shannon Mullet Bowlesby.
Yeah.
And it's made life so much
Yep.
easier.
Exactly. That's
Yeah,
what I
because
do too.
Doing it that way takes into account any wonky stitches you might have, any fractional stitches,
Yeah.
And it takes into account the stitches you made when you were tired and should have gone to bed. So they're a little bit different than your other stitches.
And also, he gives you a whole system for saying, okay, I want to make this. How much yarn I need? You could just
Exactly.
continue on
Yeah.
to figuring that out.
Exactly.
So I got over that 4-inch thing pretty
Yeah.
early on.
And I measure from top to bottom because for most things, your row gauge is not as important as your stitch gauge because you can always make things longer or
Yeah.
shorter by doing more or fewer rows. But if you happen to be making something side to side, the row gauge is mad important.
And you have other swatches?
I do. So I wanted to show you guys. This is also an 8-inch swatch I did.
And that's for the Alaska sweater.
Yeah, this is for my Alaska sweater. Now I did this swatch in the round. Now, yes, you're going to see all those things about the quick swatch method, blah, 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 blah. I don't really do that because it's just as easy to make a small tube. And this, for me, reflects more what my knitting will be like rather than me stretching some yarn across the back. That will change my gauge, at least for my hands. So I just do a small tube, and I washed it exactly the way I plan to wash the garment, which means this I threw in the washing machine and then in the dryer because it's superwash. Both the yarns are superwash wools.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to notice how this thing pulled in towards the bottom. There's the same number of stitches in the top as in the bottom. But
this is where you did the color work.
I did in the area where I did the color work, it pulled in quite a lot, and that represents the waistband of my sweater. And I did not want the bottom.
This swatch was why you did the letter back jacquard.
Exactly. So what I did was, in response to seeing this, I changed the way I did my color work to make sure that the bottom would be as stretchy as the top is. And I would not have known this ahead of time. I just did basic stranded color work for this thing, but this pattern is very irregular. So I ended up switching to ladder back jacquard for my color work, which gives the color work part just as much stretch as the rest of the garment. So I won't have this pulling in situation around the bottom of my sweater.
Does not do that at all.
Yeah, because that wouldn't be cool. Also, something I learned about doing swatches too, if you are concerned about making your measurements accurate, you can do an open cast on so that the top and bottom of your swatch won't pull. That's more of a concern for knitters than crocheters, but I think crocheters can even take away that they can do a foundation row so that the bottom won't pull in, especially if you know you tend to do tight cast-ons. But I did it that way on this swatch just so the tension would be the same and I wouldn't have anything artificially pulling in. That's why the top kind of flares here.
Okay.
And
this was for your hat?
This is for my hat. And this is one of the swatches that I had to make sure I got the row gauge.
Now that is not in pattern though, because you had those open sections in the hat.
Right. I did have the open section in the hat, but they asked you to do the swatch in all garter stitch because the hat is based in garter stitch. And I had to do, I don't know how many swatches because I couldn't get the row gauge. And I actually stopped swatching when I got close enough for me because I had never.
The hat fits.
Yeah, the hat fits. I was close enough, but I don't know how she got the gauge because I went down like 2 needle sizes and pulled in as tight as I could, but the row gauge was just never the same. But it was close enough because sometimes you don't have to hit it exactly on the spot, especially for something like a hat.
Yeah.
And I have a big head and lots of hair, so I always need a little bit of room in a hat anyway. But anyway, that's why I swatch and why I swatch multiple times.
Okay. And Mom? Now, Mom's swatches are in Tunisian. She's working on a project. And what is your sweater called?
Celeste.
And tell us about your swatches.
Okay, so I bought this pattern. It's called Celeste, and it's by Rachel Henry, yes. And I loved it, but then when I read through the pattern, I'm like, I don't know how to do this.
Read through the pattern first.
I don't know how to do that. And, it was like, she is like next level, so she does a lot of modifications to the things that we normally do in Tunisian crochet. So first thing was she did, like this was saying, the foundation, a stretchy Tunisian foundation.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to learn that.
Yes.
And then,
which one of these swatches was that?
Well, actually, this and this has that.
Okay.
So this.
Let me show them for you. So is this the foundation?
No, the bottom.
Okay.
You notice how it's just
yeah, that's really
equal to the top.
Okay.
That's what
that's
it
beautiful.
does. Yeah.
There you go. Oh, yeah.
So then I got the foundation. Yeah. But then also she did a connecting stitch for Tunisian and around because Tunisian and around can be a pain.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay. And I tried the connecting stitch. I did, like I would get it. And then
just to join the round.
Yeah. I would be like, oh, no.
That's not quite it.
Yeah. So I did it so many times. I was like, well, I might as well make something once I got it. So that's why I ended up making this little cow.
And then here's the back where you can see You can just barely see
barely
that
see it.
seam.
That's amazing.
And then I was like, well, okay, it works with.
So your swatch was to build your skill in that technique
Yes,
first.
Yeah.
it worked with the Tunisian simple stitch. I was like, well, would it work with the knit stitch? So that's why I made this part
Okay.
And
in knit
yeah.
stitch, because that was just curious by then
Okay. And you can
to
see
see.
those two different stitches
And that's for
a
the
little
top
bit.
curls because knit
Yeah.
stitch is
Yeah.
curl. Yeah.
So then I ended
Okay.
up with this cute little cowl. I was like, oh, that's cool. But then also, she did another way of increases
Ooh.
that I hadn't done. So then I was practicing the increases on this
So
one.
here's.
Mm-hmm. And that's just as neat as can
I
be.
know, right? I like this edging here, so you can see there's a different thing going on the edge.
Now, Ma, is that an edging you did, or is that just the result of doing?
That's the result of the
technique?
way we do
Mhm.
the increase.
Okay, so these were just practicing the skill.
The skills
And
that
neither
I
of
would
these are the
need.
yarn you're using for your sweater.
No.
So
And
then
even the main stitch, even the Tunisian simple stitch, she does it in, she called it the modified Tunisian simple stitch. And that was something else. I said, oh, let me
Right.
practice to see how I like it.
Mhm.
And I really, really love it because it gives you a really stable fabric
Mhm.
and a really straight line.
Yeah, it doesn't bias. Yeah.
So finally,
now we get to the actual yarn she's using for the sweater.
here's the yarn I'm going to use for the sweater.
Let me show it. And this is Fino from Manos del Uruguay, which is what I'm using for my Impossible dress.
And this is the bottom here. This is a Tunisian
Foundation.
the stretchy foundation I use at the bottom.
Yeah, you can see how nice and loose that is.
And I usually make, because I use the same technique of making the bigger swatch and measuring it and calculating. So that was my swatching.
Okay. So now you feel prepared to make the sweater
sweater,
because
yes.
you went through all of this and now you know your stitch, you know how to join. So that was just another reason to swatch.
And, I've had the yarn for a while. So, and I always have this worry, like, do I have enough? So I'll be able to do the calculations. And
she has a whole system for figuring out how much yarn it will take to make a sweater for her. And so we have sizing, we have skill building, and for me, my swatches were just to help me decide on a stitch pattern because this yarn is the Queensland Rainbow Beach. I always call it Brighton Beach. It's Rainbow Beach. Brighton Beach is a real place. Okay, so it's Rainbow Beach. And I knew I wanted to make a vest out of it. And I also knew I wanted it to be textured. But that leaves a lot of things open. So I was actually looking through this book, The Crochet Every Way Stitch Dictionary by Dora Orenstein. And all of the patterns that I chose came from this book. And this was the first one I did. And I actually really, really like this. So this is called Basket Weave. And all of them just involve post stitches arranged in different ways. And so this is going to be a reversible fabric. And it is incredibly stretchy. And then I did. So these are the other two stitch patterns I'm considering. As you can see, they gauge a little bit differently. So the top part is wider than the bottom part. Yeah. So this one on the bottom, that's called triplets. And then this one on the top is called billows. And billows is the only one that is not reversible. So depending on what you're making, whether or not you want it to be reversible, you need to check for things like that. But for the vest, it really doesn't matter. And then so these were worked at 3.5 millimeters, I think. This one, I worked billows again at 3.75. And this is just giving me a looser, more open fabric, which I really like.
Yeah,
so
I was thinking that.
I actually haven't decided which one I'm going to do. I think I'm really trying to decide between these two. But can you hold that one?
Sure.
Yeah, so that one or this one. But if I do this one, I will work with the smaller hook size. Yeah. And if I do that one, I will work with the larger hook size.
That's my favorite too. The one.
It just comes down to,
this one.
Which I think is cute. And I mean, they both are. So honestly, right now, my swatches haven't helped me a whole bunch, but I can just sit, now that I have all three of them, I can just sit and stare at them
after you decide, because that's really going to tell the story what the fabric is going to settle into.
So For me, swatching was just a way to see what the fabric would do, see how the color gradient works across these different stitch patterns, and also help me decide which hook size to work it at. Because if I show you billows at 2 different gauges,
Yeah.
so you
It
can
makes
see
a real difference.
Yeah, and so I do like it at the looser gauge.
Yeah.
So that is just another reason to swatch, to play around with your stitch pattern. Especially because I'm doing a vest and I won't be doing sleeves. I think sleeves would have made a difference for me because billows, like I said, is not reversible. I only have post stitches on one side, so it's not going to be as bulky as something like this.
Oh yeah.
So I wouldn't do sleeves with something like this. This is very hefty, and I wouldn't want to feel that bulk on the inside of the arm. So because it's a vest, I feel like I have more options, but sleeves would definitely narrow my options down.
Absolutely.
So you have to take into consideration what you're making and what would be comfortable for you, because I wouldn't be comfortable with that much bulk in my sleeves. So even if I did that, I would probably do a plain pattern for just the sleeves. Yeah. So I have my swatches here that every day I decide, oh, it's going to be this one, no, it's going to be this one, no, it's going to be this one. But I am leaning, so Mom and Lisa both like this one.
Yeah,
and
I like
this
that
is the
a
one
lot.
I'm leaning towards the most. It is just the lightest because you're not working. This is the only one where I'm not working post stitches on both sides of the fabric. And so I think this is the way I'm leaning. So those are just all the ways and the reasons to swatch, because apparently you have to swatch.
Yeah.
There's just no way around it.
That's the good news and the bad news.
And my vest, I don't have a pattern. So I also am going to be using the swatch to decide my sizing and how many stitches per row I need to do and all that good stuff. And that would just be impossible without a swatch.
Yeah, and my vest, it's not made in the pattern doesn't go up to my size.
So she's resizing.
So I'm resizing.
So that was our swatch and tell. And we'll probably do another one later in the month for Vlogmas, because, we only have so many ideas for Vlogmas. But no, this was fun. I like this a lot.
Yeah.
We'll see if we can pull Mommy in for another one.
And hopefully we'll actually have some swatches. Otherwise, I'll be sitting here like, yeah, I don't have any swatches.
She's going to have swatches. Okay.
Happy holidays.
Bye.
Bye.